There's never been a betrayal quite like this on television. America was given one of the most emotional farewells in TV history from Happy Days, and then ABC destroyed it in a single night, leaving the cast trapped in the wreckage. 1984 was supposed to be the year the show rode off into the sunset, with Tom Bosley's pointing to do, a moment of pure closure after 11 seasons of the Cunningham family. But that blunder from ABC left fans brokenhearted and the legacy fractured. How did things go so wrong? And how did 5 forgotten episodes rise from the grave to kill a classic? Secret fight that almost destroyed Happy Days. Ron Howard was ready to walk away from Happy Days. By the late 1970s, the fresh-faced actor who had carried the sitcom since 1974 dropped an ultimatum that rattled ABC's executive offices. It had nothing to do with salary disputes or creative notes. It came down to 2 words the network wanted to slip into the show's title. By its 3rd season, Happy Days had transformed into a cultural powerhouse. Families tuned in each week, advertisers lined up, and cast members became household names. But it wasn't Richie Cunningham, the all-American teenager played by Howard, who was driving the frenzy. It was Arthur Fonzarelli. Henry Winkler's Fonzie, with his leather jacket, motorcycle, and signature "Aye," had stolen the spotlight. He started as a supporting character, but quickly became a phenomenon. Kids mimicked his style. Toy stores couldn't keep Fonzie merchandise on the shelves, and ratings showed audiences were glued to his every scene. That's when ABC executives floated an idea: rechristen the show Fonzie's Happy Days. On paper, it looked like smart branding. In practice, it risked rewriting the DNA of the series. For Ron Howard, it was more than just a title tweak. It was a personal insult. He'd carved Richie Cunningham into one of the most recognizable characters on television, anchoring the show's heart and narrative. Being pushed into second place in the very series he helped launch felt like professional betrayal. In the mid-1970s, tensions began to simmer behind the scenes of Happy Days. Ron Howard, who had been America's clean-cut Richie Cunningham since the pilot, suddenly found himself facing a challenge that could have rewritten television history. As Henry Winkler's Fonzie exploded in popularity, ABC executives floated the idea of renaming the show Fonzie's Happy Days. On paper, it looked like a marketing win. In reality, it threatened to undermine everything that made the sitcom work. In a tense meeting with creator Gary Marshall and the network brass, Howard didn't hesitate. He told them flatly, if the title changed, he was out. No bargaining, no second thoughts. This was more than pride. It was about protecting the integrity of the show. At just 21 years old, Howard recognized a truth the executives ignored. Happy Days wasn't a one-man act. Fonzie's cool only shone because it was balanced against Richie's everyman charm, Marion's warmth, and the rest of the Cunningham family. Industry insiders were stunned. Young actors didn't defy the network machine, especially not over something as small as a title, yet Howard's stand forced ABC to back down, preserving Happy Days as the ensemble classic fans still remember today. The twist? Henry Winkler, the man at the center of the debate, sided with Howard. He told executives flat out, "Why fix it if it's not broken? My success depends on the ensemble I'm in." Fonzie might have been the breakout star, but Winkler knew the magic only worked because of the group dynamic. That solidarity killed the title change. Gary Marshall ultimately backed his actors and kept Happy Days as it was, but the confrontation left scars. Howard began thinking seriously about leaving acting to pursue directing, a career move that would eventually make him one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers. Looking back, this battle over 2 words foreshadowed deeper issues inside ABC. The same executives who nearly lost their leading man to a branding decision would later mishandle the show's scheduling and finale, turning what could have been a perfect goodbye into one of television's strangest send-offs. This moment wasn't just about egos. It exposed the constant tug-of-war between creativity and corporate profit that shaped television for decades. To the network, Fonzie was a cash cow. To the cast and creators, he was a character who only thrived in the world they had carefully built together. But Howard's ultimatum was only one side of the story. When the spotlight eventually dimmed, it was Henry Winkler, not Ron Howard, who faced the deepest struggle. Away from the Cheers catchphrases and leather jacket, The man behind television's coolest character was carrying a weight no one in the audience ever imagined. What pain was Winkler hiding beneath Fonzie's perfect smile? Untold pain behind the Fonz's cool smile. Henry Winkler was broke when he auditioned for Happy Days. In 1973, the actor who would later become the face of American Cool arrived in Hollywood with barely a month's rent saved. He had left New York after years of scraping by in the theater, where steady work was rare and paychecks were small. Winkler admitted later that his finances were dire. He wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was chasing survival. The irony is striking because a man who would soon play Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, the most confident character on television, was terrified as he walked into that audition room. He read for the role of a leather-jacketed biker who was originally written as comic relief. Somehow, against the odds, he got the part. That single moment changed not just his life, but also the course of television history. By the third season of Happy Days, television had a new king, and his name was Arthur Fonzarelli. What began as a minor supporting role, written for just a handful of lines each week, exploded into a cultural phenomenon. The Fonz wasn't just a character. He became a national obsession. Kids across America mimicked his, i.e., catchphrase in school hallways. Barbers saw boys asking for a slick-back hairstyle, and toy stores couldn't keep Fonzie lunchboxes, T-shirts, and action figures on their shelves. Henry Winkler, a struggling stage actor before landing the part, suddenly found himself one of the most famous faces in America. He graced magazine covers, appeared on talk shows, and received more fan mail than the rest of the cast combined. Audiences didn't just like the Fonz. They tuned in every week specifically to see what he would do next. By 1976, Fonzie was being written into nearly every storyline, and producers even moved his character into the Cunningham household to give him more screen time. Within just 2 years, Henry Winkler had gone from an unknown actor to pop culture icon, reshaping Happy Days and television itself forever. But fame came with a hidden cost. For more than a decade, Winkler was the Fonz. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the slick back hair. These weren't just character details. They became part of his identity. He poured himself so completely into the role that the line between Henry Winkler and Arthur Fonzarelli started to blur. When Happy Days ended in 1984 after 11 seasons, Winkler was unprepared for what came next. He later described the end of the show as a sting, but that word hardly captured the depth of his struggle. It felt like losing a family member. For 10 years, he'd lived as a Fonz, and then suddenly the cameras went dark. The confidence disappeared with the role, leaving him face-to-face with an identity crisis. It wasn't just about finding the next job. It was about answering a scarier question. Who was Henry Winkler without the Fonz? For over a decade, the world had only seen him through that lens. Casting directors, audiences, and even Hollywood itself couldn't separate the actor from the character. Typecasting hit him hard. He was grateful for the role that made him famous, but at the same time, he felt trapped by it. The anxiety was crushing. Winkler admitted that he feared sliding back into financial struggles that haunted him prior to Happy Days. He had it all: fame, fortune, and cultural immortality. Yet inside, he felt the same insecurity he'd carried with him when he arrived in California with a few dollars to his name. Hollywood wasn't making life easier. The Fonz had grown into something much bigger than a character. It was an American icon of cool. Audiences didn't want to see Henry Winkler as a lawyer, doctor, or teacher. They wanted the Fonz. Breaking free from that image seemed impossible. And for years, Winkler struggled with rejection and self-doubt. He still loved the character that propelled him into fame, but he feared his career had ended once Happy Days did. That was an emotional weight he carried inside, while the world outside continued to view him as the man who could make jukeboxes play with the snap of his fingers. But Henry Winkler didn't disappear. Slowly, he reinvented himself. In the 1980s, when acting roles dried up, he turned to directing, working behind the camera on projects like MacGyver and Cop and a Half. Later, he began rebuilding his acting career with fresh roles that proved his range, including his turn as Principal Hembry in Scream and his Emmy-nominated turn in Arrested Development. 2 decades later, the performance that finally won him the recognition he had long craved came via his work on HBO's Barry, which earned him an Emmy in 2018. Still, Winkler has been open about how painful the post-Happy Days years were. He has admitted in interviews that the emotional scar stayed long after the show ended. Fame gave him everything he dreamed of, but it took away something just as valuable, a sense of self. While Henry Winkler was battling his private demons, ABC executives were getting ready for a move that would trigger an even greater crisis. What rule did they dare to break? The 1984 Olympics ruined Happy Days. February 1984 was supposed to be a proud moment for ABC. The network had secured exclusive coverage of the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, a global event that promised huge ratings, prestige, and millions in advertising revenue. But behind the excitement, ABC made one of the most damaging scheduling mistakes in television history, a decision so disastrous it forever changed how networks handle finales, programming conflicts, and even the relationship between viewers and the stories they loved. This is a forgotten disaster that turned Happy Days, one of America's most beloved sitcoms, into the first zombie series on television. At first, it looked like a routine scheduling problem. The Sarajevo Games ran from February 8 to February 19, 1984. ABC, as the rights holder, cleared its primetime slots for nightly coverage of figure skating, skiing, and ice hockey. This meant that several shows were pushed out of their usual time slots, including Happy Days, which was already in its final season after an 11-year run. The displaced episodes weren't random filler. They were supposed to air in February as part of the show's final stretch leading up to its big goodbye. ABC's executives were faced with a choice: delay the finale until summer to make sure every episode aired in order, or stick to their May finale schedule and figure out what to do with the leftover episodes later. They chose the second option, and that choice broke television's most sacred rule. On May 8, 1984, Happy Days aired series finale, Passages. It was an emotional farewell. Joni and Chachi got engaged. Fonz, the show's cultural icon, finally adopted a son, and Tom Bosley, as Mr. Cunningham, gave a heartfelt toast of family and friendship. For millions of viewers, this was closure. After more than a decade of watching, they said goodbye to the characters who had defined 1970s American television. But ABC wasn't done. Once the Olympics were over, they still had those unaired February episodes. Rather than shelving them, the network brought back Happy Days in June and July months after the finale. To audiences, it was as if the dead had risen. Fans were confused, critics were baffled, and the legacy of one of America's most iconic sitcoms was tarnished. To understand how big a blunder this was, you need to understand what a series finale represents. It isn't just another episode. A finale is a contract between a show and its audience. It gives closure. It allows viewers to emotionally move on. Once that curtain drops, the story is complete. ABC's executives treated episodes like interchangeable blocks of content. To them, it was just business. Air the finale as planned, then throw in some bonus episodes for fans. But television writers, directors, and actors knew better. Storytelling follows emotional logic. You can't reopen a finished story without breaking the bond with your audience. Veteran producers in Hollywood watched in horror. They compare it to a film adding random scenes after credits or a novel publishing extra chapters after the last page. The damage wasn't just a Happy Days. It was a lesson to the entire industry. The fallout was immediate. Other networks quietly took notes, determined never to repeat ABC's mistake. By the mid-1980s, contract began including clauses that guaranteed finale protection, meaning a series ending couldn't be undermined by scheduling changes or bonus episodes. In the end, one misguided scheduling decision gave birth to a rule that still stands today. When a show ends, let it end. No resurrections, no bonus episodes, no second curtain calls.